Black revolutionaries, distillery owners, Italian fashion retailers, and Motown Grammy winners all share their best stories never before told in any other media outlets on Detroit is Different. Visit DetroitisDifferent.com or download the Detroit is Different app on Apple's App Store or Google's Play Store.
Welcome back to the Detroit is Different podcast studio. And I got somebody in effect today that is, if you go down to Detroit City Council and want to see something with Detroit politics, it's rare that you'll get there and not see this brother. This brother is definitely for show on top of many political issues that impact the city of Detroit, city council, the mayor's office, and so much of the intertwining what happens with Detroit business. This man is, for sure, walking the path as a citizen.
Right.
On behalf of citizens. Sometimes just making sure that government falls in line locally. So, Mr. Malik Shelton, how are you today, my brother?
Oh, I'm blessed and blessed with another opportunity to put some good into my account, good deeds into my account. And so every day that I wake up, I look at it that way, that I have another opportunity, you know. As long as I'm breathing, I have an opportunity to add some good things into my account, because we never see no U-Hauls behind the hearse, you know. So we come here, and we come here naked, and the only thing we leave with is our deeds. So I'm very, very every time I can wake up in the morning and breathe in and out, I'm pleased.
Okay. All right. So with that being said, these stories always start with your Detroit story. Your peoples. Are you first generation, second generation, third? What led your people to Detroit in the first place?
It's kind of hard to say. I would say that I'm probably definitely second generation.
Okay.
And the reason why it's a little difficult to say concisely, to answer that question concisely, is because my people moved around a lot, you know. I can remember my grandmother and my great-grandparents came from Georgia. But then
Whereabouts in Georgia?
Sandersville.
Where's Sandersville?
It's not too far from, it's in central Georgia, not too far from where the Color Purple, that town, was based at. It's not too far from that area.
Okay. And what about, you ever been down there?
No, I haven't.
Okay. About when did they make the move up this way?
In the early 1900s, my grandmother did. And then my mother, then they wound up going to North Carolina. Not going back, but going to North Carolina. That's when my mother was born.
Oh, so they went from Georgia to North Carolina.
Yeah.
Whereabouts North Carolina?
I'm trying to think which city she was born in. I don't have an answer for that, which city she was born in. Mm-hmm. I know it was in North Carolina. And then I know she left North Carolina, and eventually they moved to Chicago.
Okay.
And then,
so that's interesting just when we think of the migration patterns, because usually, like, it's so many black folks with roots in Georgia and Alabama because the train patterns. So the great migration patterns of so many black folks leaving what was happening in the South and heading north to places like Detroit, you know, go along the railroad lines.
Right.
And so your family zigged over a little further east to North Carolina, and then went from further east all the way west to Chicago.
Yeah, that's my mother's side.
Okay, on your mom's side.
Yeah, my father was born in Little Rock, Arkansas.
Ah, okay.
And, my paternal parents, and then my paternal grandfather, he had some problems down there with the whites, and actually they tried to kill him. They shot him with a shotgun.
They shot him or shot at him with a shotgun?
Yeah, they actually hit him.
Damn, he got hit with a shotgun.
Yeah, it wasn't a fatal blast.
Okay, wait. Let me explain this for anybody that don't know. And I'm not necessarily saying that I'm a guns expert or anything, but so if you're going to get a firearm to protect yourself, they'll say, like, the first thing you definitely probably want to consider is a shotgun, because the thought process is, even if you don't got good aim, the buckshots and the expansion of a shotgun and the spread of it, you're going to hit a target. Almost, like you've seen movies where people like cock the shotgun like, hey, we got problems. And it's like, no, you don't have no problems. Because technically with, a hand pistol, you got to have some good aim. You got to know what you're doing. A shotgun blast is so vast and it usually kills a target.
Right.
So your grandfather took on a shotgun.
Well, I don't know the distance that he was from it.
Still. Oof.
But he did get hit by some of the pellets. And so I believe that he was at enough distance from the shotgun blast that the pellets had spread to a considerable extent where he got hit by some of the pellets. He didn't get the full force of the blast. And he left as a result of that experience. He packed up his family and they left Little Rock, Arkansas, and they moved to Chicago.
All right, so that's the other thing I was going to say. The migration patterns of Arkansas go right into Chicago. So like a lot of black folks from Chicago or from Louisiana, Arkansas, possibly Mississippi, the Delta blues. So like hence that blues pattern and the way that, because I love blues, but like the way like a Muddy Waters plays blues is a little bit different than a John Lee Hooker here in Detroit because of the patterns of it and the flow and a lot of different culture. So Chicago would make sense where your family met because your mom's in Chicago, your dad ends up in Chicago, connecting from Chicago, our cousin city or sister city or brother city. However, Chicago and Detroit are a lot alike and still different,
Right. Yeah, they met as teenagers. I think she was about 15 or 16. He was about 17 or so. And they met in Chicago. And eventually they got married. When they married, they moved from Chicago to Detroit.
So even before we get into that, your grandfather, do you know anything of, like, did you ever connect with your grandparents? What was their whole background? You said he was escaping racism, which a lot of people fled racism, and that's why North. I mean, it was not just the job opportunities. I mean, this is a common story in Coleman Young, Jimmy Boggs, or James Boggs. I mean, you name somebody, the threat of murder,
Little Rock,
racism, is heavy.
Arkansas or Little Rock, Arkansas, more specifically. I did some studying on that city during the the turn of the century, the 1900s, early 1900s, 1920s. Very, very racist. A lot of racist incidents.
I think you can almost look at anywhere in America in the 1900s, and the probability of black people there and racist incidents happening.
Right.
I would imagine if this was like a chart or something, and there was a bell curve. Everywhere in America is maybe one standard deviation away from what we would consider an extremely racist incident. The South, on the other hand, because there were so many more black people at the time there, the incidents of murder, death, lynchings were so heightened. But this becomes a pervasive issue in America as black folks start migrating to other places.
Yeah. Well,
this becomes very prevalent.
The racism in the North, although it was widespread, it was a little bit different from the type that our people encountered
in the South,
in the southern states, because down there, they could cheat you, and if you questioned it, that could be an offense that might cost a black person their lives.
Many things.
So if you was working for, like, let's say for instance, they call them sharecroppers. And at the end of the year, when it was time for the black sharecropper, so-called sharecropper, to get his pay, when the crops came in, and say, for instance, he's supposed to get $2,000 for the year, and they pay him $500. And he say, hey, you still owe me $1,500.
You could get murdered for saying it.
And the white man said, you calling me a liar, boy?
So let me explain more of this economic system to people. Yeah. It's so interesting because I gave a presentation where I broke this down not too long ago. So sharecropping, for a person to know what sharecropping is, and these are these are the roots that really tie into like the very challenging, devastating, traumatic past, but also through this, the brilliance of the creativity of our people here as Black people experiencing the racism of America. So first off, we have to frame all of this. So I'm going to go on one of those long, Kari Detroit's different diatribes, but I hope you all appreciate this. So let's frame this. Enslavement in America is happening in the southern states. And the enslavement of the southern states is supported from the north because the north is the industrial spaces that would process a lot of what would be happening from the labor in the South. So after the Civil War and what led to the Civil War, because even after the Emancipation Proclamation, people make it seem like when America was founded, these people agreed. They did not agree. It took the time of the founding of America to the Civil War for the Confederate states, the southern states, to find enough allies in Portugal and the Dutch and all of these other foreign lands, and to give enough money to America to the Confederate states to fight the Union states, right? And this is also after what happened where, France, which had a lot of territories in America, is toppled and no longer has interest in America itself, right? So this is framing a lot of where things are going, where you still had a lot of European nations wanting to take advantage of the exploits of the colonization and the enslaved labor of our people here. Now, after the Civil War, you got to shut this whole operation down because the thought process is if you allow enslavement to continue, then it's only going to take 1 or 2 years for the Confederate States to rise up again. Hence the South will rise again. And what's agreed upon in this is, first off, a hell of a reparations package for a lot of those Confederate states and those people that were enslaving Black people. And one of the key things within the reparations package is a lot of those enslavers now could just transition into sharecropping ownership. So sharecropping is basically like you have the skill and the labor and the talents to yield and harvest whatever these crops we grow. I don't know nothing about this because I'm an enslaver. My whole goal was making sure that you stay captured, making sure that you can be productive and I can sell things, right? But now I'm transitioning to a sharecropper. And this sharecropping industry presents itself as the concept of basically you can tend to this land, and in exchange for what you tend to in this land, you will be paid and you will possibly have access to the house and you'll have access to some crops to quote unquote eat and survive. So sharecropping in a lot of ways was more horrid than the experience of what enslavement was, because as Malik just also spoke of, they didn't necessarily have to honor any business deals because especially in the South, there were so many race laws of like, you still don't even get counted as a human being. You can't go to court. It's so many other things. And then if you were to question or reckless eyeball, all these like Jim Crow laws, then you could be murdered. Like these were justifiable laws on the books, which a lot of people definitely said, I ain't got time for this shit. I'm going to another place. Right. And that other place that created with a lot of people, when we think of Detroit, is industry. So Henry Ford presents this whole concept of like, hey, we're going to give you the $5 workday. So you're making more than what you were sharecropping and everything. So now a lot of Black people, when we think of Detroit, come to Detroit, right? You're getting paid less than the white person immediately. But this is the distorted angle of America too. The minute Black people start coming to these places where predominantly Black people didn't exist, now starts the labor movement, which is distorted. So union movements were based on the whole idea of white people not wanting to work next to Black people. And a lot of those horrors that existed too, and a lot of the racism that starts in these institutions, right? So you get an opportunity from an industrialist like that gives you a job opportunity, pays you less than what you're supposed to get, and you're working with people next to you that are giving you some of the same discrimination and racism that you just escaped from the South. It's a little bit different because the laws aren't on the books the same, but you're still getting treated and exploited again for your talents and your creativity and what you know. Then time goes on with the labor movement, where the labor movement's like, hey, we need these black people to be a part of what we're doing so that we can actually argue a better argument to these corporations to have fair and balance. And this still isn't even so balanced. Hence the League of Revolutionary Workers and everything. General Baker and all those brothers, Jimmy Boggs, the American, when we think of all of this foundation here in and around Detroit and places like Detroit. I mean, so much of it calcifies in Detroit because a lot of black opportunity comes from the idea of black exploitation, always. So when we frame what this is, and then you think of the chaos of what we're looking at when we look at the reflection of our communities, it's rooted in so much of the chaos of all of our opportunities have been connected to exploitation for so long. And so many of those same arguments can be made today for some of the experiences of what we're experiencing, i.e. the prison industrial complex, i.e., and I love my Northwestern school, but Northwestern had a lot of resources that were allocated towards like gang squad units, homeland security. Like a lot of the funding into where I went to high school was funding going into criminalizing who could be there, right? So that means that you need criminals to continue to get this funding. And I'm not necessarily pointing fingers at any particular people or administrators or any leaders in these positions. I'm just pointing out the idea of, like we say, black opportunity and black exploitation go hand in hand in America in a way that causes so much chaos because there is so much opportunity here, but it aligns with so much exploitation. So that's a long Kari diatribe, but I wanted to give that as Malik kind of led me and drove me down that street, because Chicago is one of those cities where we see it so pervasively when you think about the segregation there. And the only thing closer to it within the city limits of Chicago. Detroit, on the other hand, the segregation was so explicitly, you had an inside Detroit and the outside Detroit. So now I want you to pick up with that Chicago connection with your family. And I know that was a long diatribe, but I wanted to get that out.
Well, my grandfather, he came up to Chicago and he worked for the railroads. As I believe he was a porter.
Okay.
He wasn't a very talkative person. I guess maybe he was tired.
That era of men, I could see that.
Yeah, maybe he was tired, because my grandmother didn't really work from what I can remember. She just watched, and they had a large family, they had about 10 or 11 children between them. Mm-hmm. And so he had to work. And she basically stayed home watching the children. Mm-hmm. And so looking back on it now, I can see why he probably wasn't as gregarious and talkative. Yeah. Because he probably was tired, Yeah. And when I did see him, it was early in the morning, he'd be eating breakfast or something. He didn't say too much. But I heard about his experience in Little Rock, Arkansas, from my older brothers and from my mother and so forth. But yeah, I was born in Chicago myself, but my mother and father.
Whereabouts? What neighborhood?
On the south side.
Okay.
Yeah, on the south side, Cook County Hospital. Didn't stay there that long because my mother eventually left Chicago and came to Detroit when I was 3. So I arrived in Detroit at the age of 3.
Where do you all move to when you first get here?
I can remember living in the Jeffries Projects when I was very young.
You grew up in the Jeffs.
Now, where I lived at before then, I can't remember.
So let's talk a little bit about the Jeffs. Another, as we say, thing of opportunity, possibly exploitation, exists in the black experience, but also full of culture. So what was the Jeffries Projects like? What do you remember about it? What was happening?
I remember my Halloween bag getting snatched when I was young.
Okay.
I remember going across the freeway to Lodge to the elementary school, and but I remember having fun. I was young, So, when you're young, you're going to have fun. You're going to make the best out of the situation. My mother, she worked. My father wasn't around at that time. They had got divorced. He stayed in Chicago. He would come through sometime. And then we left that. I don't have a lot of memories about the Jeffries projects. I know that it was tough. We had to depend on social services. ADC, I think they called it that time, age-dependent children, ADC. But it wasn't. Looking back on it, I can't really recall anything that traumatic except for the fact that I got my Halloween bag snatched.
Yep.
But my brothers went out looking for them though.
What do you remember, like some of the people, the culture, was the music? Because this is another thing that becomes more prevalent as the housing crisis across America exists right now. And one of the solutions to this were the project developments. And a lot of people that stayed, especially like the first iterations of project developments, weren't necessarily there because of Nas's Illmatic album. It was because the discrimination for that being one of the few places where black people could live. So, it would be people, you be next to jazz musicians and nurses and, it's like, why are you in the projects? It's like, because this is the only place black people can live up to a certain point. Then things start transitioning as time goes on, and some of these other barriers of entry towards housing exist, which now that housing crisis is slowly bubbling up in America big time again for affordable housing and access to just any housing in America. So that's why I wanted to, bring it up.
My memories of the Jeffries Project are not that extensive. I remember hurting myself, jumping on the bed, little stuff that I did as a child. But we weren't there
that long. Maybe
from the time I was about 3 or 4 on up to the time I was about 5 or 6.
Where do you go from there?
We went to Southwest Detroit.
So Southwest Detroit,
I like to call it South Detroit. Because oftentimes when people say Southwest Detroit, oftentimes people think of the area over there on Warren.
They think Mexican town.
And they think where the Mexicans, where it's a predominantly Mexican or Latino community. Where I live further south, we call it South Detroit, which is down near Schaefer and Outer Drive.
It's like connecting to
E-Course, River Rouge, and so forth.
So for people watching, the BMF series right now through 50 Cents, that whole connection and area, which is one of the more, I would say that culture of black Detroiters is a little bit different because that wave of Detroiters that stayed there were kind of some of the last Detroiters to come to Detroit. So the roller rink and the culture of that community is a little bit different with black folks because it's a different type of knit family. Because some of the other black folks, man, here for I got family from Black Bottom and da-da-da-da. Those people is like, yo, we just got here. You know what I'm saying? And when I say got here, meaning a lot of waves in the 70s as a lot of that land, they would say, was contaminated and not safe and it wasn't as developed on. But it ended up becoming a black community within itself, almost like its own culture, I would say, of that community when we think of, from the stories I hear, the 70s, the 80s, the early 90s.
Well, everything that was going on anywhere else in Detroit was also going on in South Detroit. I mean, they had their gangsters.
Yeah, definitely. You seeing that?
They had their sports. Everything that was going on the east side and on the west side was also going on out there. You know? But it was a different. It looked different because it was more of a rural flavor to it. But believe me, everything that was going on the east side, on the west side, was also going on south.
But I do want to interject. It's like Kevin Hansen with Johansson Galleries, another brother from South Detroit, as you say. He tells stories of you could shovel the snow at a dentist. It was more of a close-knit community, I would say, than others. So, you could shovel the snow at a dentist, and then you could get, discounts on your dental care and things like that. People kind of knew the neighborhood a little bit more. And I'm not saying they didn't know the neighborhood as much in other places, but just because some of the...
Yeah, it was smaller.
Yes.
It was a smaller, more, I don't want to say closed off, but it was just a smaller geographical area where you had to kind of go across a bridge and all that to get to it, you know. So it was kind of it was kind of compartmentalized,
Yes.
in a way, and people identified one another because it was small. It was almost like a small town, although it was Detroit. It was almost like its own little enclave, you know.
And it connects to Inkster, River Rouge,
River Rouge,
Ecorse. Yeah, like that whole world.
Yeah, Inkster's further out though.
Yeah.
It connects to Ecorse and River Rouge.
River Rouge, yeah.
And then across, you get across the West Side of Drive is Lincoln Park.
Yeah.
And then you got Melvindale and all of that.
Those are not black communities.
And you got Del Rey, right? Now, I'm just trying to give an idea of where it's located.
Footprint. So that neighborhood, that community, coming up from that lens, you also see like industries in the mix of over there too.
Yeah, they had just a few miles down Schaefer. You know, you had Schaefer and Fort Street. That's like the border. Fort Street is the border from South Detroit, which was a black community. You crossed Schaefer going north. Now you're in Melvindale. That was a white community. You keep going further down, maybe 2 miles down Schaefer into Melvindale and a little further down. Now you got the Rouge plant. And at that one time, the Ford Rouge plant was the largest industrial complex in the world. It's still huge.
Yeah.
And so you had a lot of people that lived in South Detroit, especially, that I can remember, that worked in that plant. And they put them on the hardest jobs. You know, they put them in the foundry and this and that. But, you know, these guys were, they worked there even though it was killing them because they wanted to support their families. And a lot of them came from the South, Louisiana, Alabama, and different places, Arkansas. And, there was an opportunity for them to support their family. They had families. You know, back in those days, I'm talking about in the 60s and the 70s, the black family consisted of husband, wife, children. It was very rare to see a single woman raising a family. If you did see it, usually she was a widow. You know, it's not like it is now. So you had a proliferation of black families, and oftentimes the father worked at the steel mill or the auto assembly plant or something of that nature, and he worked long hours. And they had usually families. You had at least 2 children, all the way up to 5 or 6 or 7 or 8. And so that man, he was putting in a lot of overtime at the steel factory and at the auto manufacturing plant. And the woman was at home. She might have a part-time job, but for the most part, her job was being a homemaker and making sure the children were taken care of as far as their behavior. They weren't getting into trouble. They were dressed properly, right? They were going to school and stuff of that nature.
So with that, what was the work? What did your mom do?
Oh, my mother was a nurse.
Where at?
She started off at Detroit Receiving Hospital.
Wow,
Well, actually, she started off at Sunby Hospital on Visitor Road.
Okay.
Sunby Hospital was a black hospital.
Okay. Speak on it.
Yeah. And it was a small black hospital in River Rouge on Visitor Avenue. And then she left there, and she worked at Detroit Receiving. Then she left Detroit Receiving, and she worked at the VA hospital.
So she ended up working at, and I've never even heard about this hospital in River
Sunby.
Rouge. Yeah. Okay.
It's a black hospital. In fact, Detroit had several black hospitals because they were not able to get the type of care at the white hospitals because of the racism, the overt racism. So they established their own hospitals for the black doctors and black nurses, and Sunby was one of them.
Okay.
It was a small black hospital. And matter of fact, it remained open, if I remember correctly, all the way up to the early 70s before it shut down.
Okay. All right. So during this time, where are you going to school? Where do you end up for middle and high school?
I went to Boynton. I went to Jeffries for elementary school. Then I went to Boynton for middle school because we moved. We were moving around quite a bit. And but then by the time we got kind of settled, my mother she remarried my stepfather. His name was Charles, and she married him when I was probably about 8 or 9. And then he worked at Chrysler, and so because of that experience, they bought a house on Electric Street, about 2 or 3 blocks from West Outer Drive in Southwest Detroit. And that's when my life became more stable, because we stayed there all the way up to the time I got, graduated from high school. And so I went to high school. I went to high school from when I lived on Electric. I went to Southwestern High School.
Okay.
And then I came out of Southwestern High School in around the mid-70s.
Okay. All right. Mid-70s, Southwestern. Where you go after that?
I worked with my stepdad and worked with my stepfather. And we traveled throughout the Midwest selling bootleg 8-track tapes.
Hilarious. Okay.
And I made good money, too.
So, because I like your stories, explain what an 8-track is for those that don't know what an 8-track is.
Some music. I guess it's a music contraption. I mean, for those of you who don't remember, the 8-track, maybe remember the cassette. If you can't remember the cassette, I may not be able to help you.
They probably don't remember the CD.
Oh, man. But anyway, it was something, it was about twice as big as this.
Okay.
And probably about 3 times as thick. And it contained a tape, an audio tape. And you put it into the cassette. I mean, not the cassette, but the 8-track player in the car, or in your
house or whatever.
In your house.
Okay.
And, your record player, what have you. If it became.
Whose music were you? Who was the best seller? I would ask.
Oh, man.
I love music.
We had a lot of sellers, man. Whatever was hot,
Okay.
Because he had a connection with a guy in West Virginia.
Oh, he had a whole operation. This wasn't like a.
Yeah, he left Chrysler.
Okay, this was good then.
And when he left Chrysler, he began to make some pretty good money. In fact, I made good money working with him.
Okay.
We used to go up to the factories, parking lots when they let out on their shifts. And guys would say, "Oh, man, I really don't want this. How much is it?" And I give him the price. He said, "Oh, man, I'm just going to buy it to help you out." He didn't realize I was making 3-4 times the money that he was making in the factory.
Hilarious.
And I let him think that.
Hey.
Yeah, man, help me out.
There you go. There you go. All right. So from there, entrepreneurial, more so from a hustle, but still you learning the transactions of people and the ebb and flow. As I always say, I think the toughest business is when you have to do hand-to-hand transactions because you're dealing with so many personalities. You don't know where things are, and you're really negotiating multiple sales all the time.
Yeah. And plus, we was going from city to city, and we would go to Flint, Saginaw. We would go to Louisville. We go south, Cincinnati, Covington, Kentucky, Louisville, Kentucky. Especially during Derby time, we'd go down to Louisville, where there's a lot of people. Yeah, Dayton, Ohio. Almost got robbed in Dayton.
All right, here we go.
Sister tried to set me up, but y'all from Detroit. I saw the setup, so I backed up out of it.
Okay, all right.
Trying to set me up to get robbed.
Ohio players.
Yeah, and Dayton was rough little, fast little city.
My truck driving life, my route was in Dayton because they sent the black drivers to the black cities and stuff. You know, but Dayton, as I say, one of my favorite cities of funk.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? They got a lot of it down there.
I love Cincinnati too.
Okay.
When we go through Cincinnati, I love Cincinnati.
Okay.
For some reason, Cincinnati just captured my heart, man.
You like Northern Kentucky? That's what I call it. I got a bunch of family there. My dad from there, so Northern Kentucky, as they call it.
And but it was an experience.
Mm-hmm.
But as you say, you know, you meet all kinds of different people, but it takes a certain type of mentality to be able to do that kind of work because you're constantly walking up to strangers.
Yeah.
Trying to get them to go in their pocket to buy something.
Yeah.
And
you learn a lot about body language.
yeah.
You learn, here's sales 101, and I'm sure you can echo this. Mm-hmm. It sounds crazy because you don't think this unless you're selling. Mm-hmm. If they don't say no, that means they're saying yes. Right. That's how you got to think when you're doing stuff like that.
And if you go into, like a lot of times people go into beauty salons, and I notice this, not so much with the men, but definitely with women. More so, I think, with women is my experience. If you went into a business or an establishment where there were a lot of women working, and if you can get one of the women to buy, then the rest are going to start coming and they'll become interested, especially once they see she's interested, and really especially if they see her actually buy something, then they're going to start looking and buying. But especially if it's the owner or the manager, and she says no, the rest of them are going to say no. But if you can get that one, and especially if she's the owner or the manager, just like I just was saying, to say yes and buy something, oh, you in.
There we go. All right, so from this, you picking up people skills, body language, learning how to sell. And here's the other thing, like they always say, if you're a good salesperson, you always have a job, which in America, it's just the truth. You know what I'm saying? So where do you go from there? Because that's more, and I call that hustle. And the difference to me between a business and a hustle is, in a business, we're thinking long-term, way down the line, like where things can go, possibly 10, 20 years. A hustler is thinking, how do I maximize my amount of money as in now, immediately, you know? So that's how I deviate the both to me. Well, when you blacken in business, you got to have a little hustle in you just because it's America, but continue.
Well, I'm going to backtrack for a minute because even before I started working with my stepdad on that tip, on the business tip, he influenced me. I think he was the first person to actually influence me to let me know about how black people were being exploited and some of the things that we needed to do to empower ourselves. Because he used to speak along those lines. He was affiliated with the Nation of Islam. He wasn't a member of the Nation of Islam, but he was he had close contacts with them, and he would participate in some of their events and go to some of their meetings and so forth. And sometimes he would take me with him, and he would buy the paper, and I would read it, look through it, and he would speak along those lines about black empowerment, black economic empowerment, and so forth, black history, and I think I learned that like a seed was nurtured in me or planted because of that. And so when at the age of about 13 or 14, well, I met Malcolm X through my stepdad. When I was about, I guess I was about 9 years old. He spoke when he did that message to the Grassroots over here at King Solomon Church.
You were there?
Yeah.
Wow.
At 9. And then after he spoke, my stepdad introduced me to him afterwards.
At 9, and I know it's hard to remember because you're a kid.
Yeah.
Did you recognize, like, did the speech have an impact on you at 9? Like, did you recognize, like, oh, man, I'm at something? Because I think I was, like, 13 at the Million Man March, and almost I often think of that because I'm like, wow, you gathered this many people, this many brothers together, no incidents, I've never experienced anything like that in my life. And my dad was saying that then when we went, and I was like, I don't know, it was hard to contextualize. When you were 9, hearing a speech like that. So for people that know, Message to the Grassroots is the classic Malcolm X speech of, the field nigga, or the house nigga. And it would be, to me, delivered here in Detroit. We through the Bog Center, we were honoring this, and others. Malcolm X Grassroots Association honored this too. Like, it's a pivotal message by Malcolm X to black people, and soon after he's murdered and assassinated. So that lasting message, recorded through Milton Henry on tape, like, this is like a powerful message about how black engagement together and empowerment, what that means. So I'm saying at 9, that's powerful that you were there. Right. What impact did you know that you were like, this is history,
I knew there was something special going on.
Okay.
Because I had never seen anyone and as charismatic as Malcolm. I didn't even know what charisma was at the time, probably, if you would ask me, but whatever that is, although I couldn't name it, I felt it.
Yeah.
And I said, this guy here, I've never seen anybody like this before, And he was a little scary because, his style of speaking is very, no nonsense. But then I noticed the difference after he was not speaking and when I met him personally. He wasn't the same fiery type person. He was very charming, very polite, very warm. I felt the warmth of the man. And that stayed with me. I shook his hand, and my stepdad introduced me to him. And then not long after that, he was assassinated.
Yeah.
And I remember even people in my own family, especially older people, were basically saying, you live by violence and you die by violence. But then later on, that troubled me. So I began to look more into his life and listen to some of his speeches. We'd get his records. Plus in high school, we had a Black Studies course in high school, and then we had a teacher.
Who was the teacher?
Woman. She was a black woman. I can't remember her name, but she was a black woman. And she was a very good teacher. I learned
at Southwestern.
At Southwestern.
So let me also contextualize this. Is Detroit is Different is the tapestry and puzzle pieces. Shout out to Attorney Jeff Edison that brought this up and uplifted this, that a lot of the movement to get black studies in schools was supported by so many others. One of the people that supported him from SNCC was Mama and Dad. Dr. Gloria House helped him, but the League of Revolutionary Workers, as I found out, Marion Kramer was speaking about this, but it was a strong movement in the early 70s to get black studies in all schools in DPS. And when it came in fiery. So we're talking about Mumford, Cooley, Martin Luther King High School was Northeastern at one point in time. Is Martin Luther King kind of connected to that movement? So that 70s group of DPS students were on a whole trend of revolutionary awakening around what blackness means and black studies and connecting to Afrocentricity. So I look at a lot of my big homies, Baba Malik Yakini and rest in peace, Kwame Kenyatta, and what he did, like that lockout at Cooley. Like, students were walking out and locking doors, like, if we don't get this here. So, it led to some strong, powerful
we had
teachers.
We had a black student union at Southwestern. But I was involved not so much in the Black Student Union. We had a community organization called the ABN Association.
What's ABN?
Association of Black Nationalists. It was a community-based organization that I founded along with 2 of my friends.
In high school?
Yes, I was 14.
Wow. You was 14 and made Association of Black Nationalists. Ain't that
I was the Minister of Information.
Okay.
And
this is definitely pervasive, as you can see the influences of the Panthers, the League of Revolutionary Workers, the Republic of New Africa. Like, if you put this in our community to idolize, this is where young people gravitate to, because that's some powerful stuff. So you said you were the Minister of Information.
Yeah, the Minister of Information in ABN, and we protected the community. You know, we protected the community against internal threats as well as external threats. You know, and we had a run-in with a white motorcycle gang back in the early '70s who were being disrespectful to black women as they waited for the bus. You know, the motorcycle gang's headquarters was on Fort Street, not too far from Outer Drive. And they had a bus stop there, and the sisters were being harassed. And we eventually had to run them out of the neighborhood. And so we did a lot of things to make certain that the community was safe, but it wasn't as big a job as it would be now. And the reason for it is because you had stronger families, black families. And therefore, if you have stronger black families, more engaged with one another, then you have stronger communities. If you have weak, shattered, undermined, fractured black families, you're going to have an undermined, shattered, weak communities. And so that allows destructive elements to come in, you know. So our job wasn't that difficult then because you had, as I said, you had stronger families and stronger communities. And they would automatically band together to keep destructive elements out. See, when I was coming up, let's say late 60s, definitely in the mid 60s when I was very young, it was rare to see a drug addict. If you saw a drug addict, that was like, he's a drug addict.
Well, I want to
be like that.
I want to frame this.
Yeah, like take a picture of that.
I want to frame this up a little bit. Okay, now during that time is also people watch like The Godfather of Harlem, especially connected to like the speakeasies and so much of that. Heroin is present.
Yeah.
But the way that street life, as I can kind of contextualize it from so many of these stories, is it's not as in the face of everybody. Even the deals would go down differently. Like, it wouldn't be like, hey, this my block, this my spot. It would be particular places, particular spaces, particular people.
Yeah.
And it would definitely be far away from a child's eye.
Yeah, it was
a family environment as well.
Yeah, it was isolated, and
yes.
You didn't have crimes against young people and old people to the extent you have it now. Not
Definitely not. No,
you had it, but it was rare.
Different. And then, especially when we think of, I think back to the exploitation and opportunity. So many of those black soldiers that served in Vietnam, that were drafted into Vietnam. When you talk about Fort Wayne is the known place that people would be like, oh, you don't want that letter from Fort Wayne, brothers would say. And I assume, that's something that's probably your big homies was thinking about, not necessarily you. But a lot of those brothers came back struggling with different addictions. And the methadone clinics that were prevalent throughout American society. Things start to change.
Well, heroin hit, late 60s when it started hitting Detroit.
Yes.
They had what they call the penny capsules, $1 capsules of heroin. Cost $1. And it began to become more prevalent in the neighborhoods. In your dope houses would spring up here and there. But you still had strong communities.
Yes.
Although the heroin addiction and drug houses began to infest not just Southwest Detroit, but the whole city of Detroit.
This is
and it had an impact.
It definitely,
because guys got strung out.
Yeah.
Guys who had a revolutionary mindset or a black nationalist mindset would get strung out on heroin, and they begin to rip off their community, because of their drug addiction, you know. Not necessarily to the extent where they were robbing members, although they did that too, but a lot of it was just lying
Yeah.
to get people to give them money,
Yeah.
and then taking the money and running off and spending it on dope.
Yeah.
And stuff of that nature. But again, I have to say this: the black communities, were a lot different than what they are now, because you had a stronger family, and you had values that were passed down, and you had a community that was stronger. And even if you began to go astray, maybe if your parents didn't know it, if the neighbors saw it, they'd call you over
Yeah.
and say, "Hey, man."
The cultural dynamics were definitely different. So you move from this. How do you get now? Because I know a history, and man, this is an interesting, deep.
Well, see, with me, it's not linear. It's not like
It's not from here to here.
I started off doing one thing,
Then you go to this.
and I go to something else, and then I go down that road, and then I go up into something else, and then I go down that road. No. That's what's different about my life, is that I was involved in street stuff at the same time sometimes that I was involved in militant or black empowerment activities.
So where do you, because I know you from more of idea of knowing like city contracting, development and work like that. Where does your frame and lens open up, or when does it open up to municipal politics?
Okay.
Things like that.
Now we getting, now we bringing it up to about the last, I would say, 1999. Because as you recall, I met you years ago when I worked as a writer, reporter for the Michigan Citizen.
Yes, sir.
Like I would say around 2004, 2005. somewhere around
And even then,
there. Yeah.
what were you doing to end up as a journalist there at the Citizen?
Because my love for writing, which happened at an early age, I would read books by certain black authors. Richard Wright. I think Richard Wright was one of the first authors that really influenced me tremendously to want to write. I wrote his books, Native Son, Black Boy, and so forth. And it was just something about that experience that just grabbed a hold of me. And I said, man, I wish I could write like that. And I began to write. And then I would read other black authors like James Baldwin. I would read his essays, The Fire Next Time, and all, some of the other stuff he did. Some of his novels, Go Tell It on the Mountain, which I think is, to me, his best novel was Go Tell It on the Mountain. The Invisible Man, Ralph Ellison, and others. And that, it stuck in me.
So the writing impacted reading impacted the writing, and then the writing now becomes where you're on the paper.
And then, okay, I like to write. I enjoy writing. I enjoy the intellectual as well as the creative aspect of it.
So when are you first published? Because I know that's 99, and you're writing, it seems like if you're writing from a childhood on up, you writing all the time. When does it become, I want to publish something?
Well, when I was writing, I was not concerned with being published in newspapers.
Okay.
I was concerned with writing a great novel.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? And I never was able to write the great novel because at the same time, I have this inclination and passion for writing. I'm also running the streets. You know what I'm saying? And they don't quite go together.
Donald Goines would differ, but I feel you. Donald Goines would definitely differ. But
well, I don't know.
But you didn't want to write.
I did want to write. I had a lot of writing,
Street. No, I was saying.
but
Like
I didn't get published.
Okay. You didn't want to do
I
the
don't know
street
his
stuff.
story.
Yeah,
I don't know how he was able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I know it got him. It led to his death.
It led to, yes, definitely.
So he did it, but he ain't around no more.
So Donald Goines is for people that don't know, a very very well known, as they would call him, I guess. See, because I call street, like when I think of, as you say, street, I think of street culture that's connected to the criminality. As I say, the opportunity and exploitation line right up. So one of the key opportunities that are exploited, especially for young black men, but young black women too, but very pervasively when we think of the prison industrial complex, is street culture. Because there's opportunity in it, but it's also exploiting so many brothers and the criminality. And one of the writers that writes so much about this is Donald Goines. Donald Goines was an author from Detroit. He's murdered in Highland Park. So much around like his death still is like folklore. Black Gangster is one of his books. Tar Baby, which is basically the novel. Like, and so much of this kind of like Iceberg Slim, like where you just get street culture and street narratives to become pervasive, like similar to what hip hop and rap is today, was through these novels. So like a Tar Baby is basically a woman at the time working in prostitution that is black, that has a child with a John or a man buying, exploiting her as a prostitute, hence the whole Tar Baby. So a lot of stories like that come from Donald Goines and Iceberg Slim, and a lot of that street culture is now in novel,
Mm-hmm. But see, the type of novel
but I'm guessing you would
that I was writing, that wanted to write, was not of that genre. Although I experienced
a lot of
that stuff, I did not want to write those types of novels.
So in this militancy, and I guess
which is not to say that I didn't want to include street
into it,
because I have that experience,
and that's where I was.
But I didn't just want it to be strictly, so and so was selling dope.
Yeah,
he had some women out here, with some hoes,
and blah, blah, blah.
No, I wanted to make it more comprehensive.
So similar to but the militancy and the revolutionary and the nationalism, but also, like we say, the exploitation of street opportunity. How do you balance this, and how do you, you know what I'm saying? How do you even balance it in your mind along these lines to take that turn towards seeing I guess I may open the street window.
Even in the first organization that we started when I was 14, you had street guys in it. We had street guys in it. That's true. That's even true for the organizations like the Black Panther Party. They didn't get guys. I mean, they were getting guys and talking to them, and guys that were coming into the organization. Many of them were street guys. Some of them were like Bunchy Carter. He used to be the head of a street gang called the Slawsons in Los Angeles. And he became one of their deputy ministers of Los Angeles.
Rest in peace, Bunchy. My friend Yusef Shakur honors through the name, and Bunchy was one of those for sure revolutionaries and organizers that would gather people almost at L.A. So study Bunchy Carter and the organizing of it. It was a documentary, Bastards of the Party, that was accessible through HBO a couple years ago, talking about the alignment between the back to the targeted dismantling of the Black Panther Party that you can see through Judas and the Judas and the Messiah, speaking to Fred Hampton. But the way the FBI and the CIA and police targeted the Black Panthers tragically caused for a lot of hysteria that so many political prisoners are incarcerated to this day for. You can study the archives of Detroit is different when I interview some of the Panthers connected to that through Youssef. My bad. I just want to frame that as it's also like, you're right. Street culture exists because opportunity is not abundant.
Right.
The militancy and the organizing is about providing opportunity. Sadly, some of those same perils, we all struggle with. It's in our community.
Exactly. And so I was hustling, involved in legal as well as illegal activity as a youngster and also as a young man. But I was also involved politically. And even when I wasn't directly involved politically as far as in an organization, I was still in tune to it. I would still read, books with, black scholars or black activists. And so I was aware I never lost touch with the fact that, hey, we're in black people in America is still living under exploitation, repression, and oppression. And we still need to do something about it. And so that's always been there. Now, to answer your question concerning how did I get to the point where you start seeing me going down to the council and interacting with these city
Local
officials.
policies.
Yeah.
Local politicians.
That happened when I met a man named Ramon Jackson back in 2019. He was giving a talk online, being interviewed, and it caught my attention, the things that he was saying. And it resonated. I said, man, who's this guy? He's talking some deep stuff, and because I had really stopped paying attention to what was going on in local politics. I was still paying attention to what was going on nationally and internationally, but stuff that was going on downtown in the local government, what the council was doing, or what the mayor was doing, or what city officials were doing, I wasn't really, paying that much attention to that until I started interacting with this brother. Then he started putting me up on what they were doing right up under our noses that we're not aware of. And then being a journalist, I always look into things. And so I would listen to what the brother was saying. I said, it sounds good. Let me go check it out, right? And I would go check it out. And it was true. Like you said, Brother Malik, they only spend about 3% of the city's general fund budget, which is approximately $1.4 billion to come every year. Approximately $1.4 billion. You only spend around 3% of that $1.4 billion on community development. I said, wow. Then I went and checked it out. And sure enough, that's what they spend. And so then he was putting me up on different ways that they misappropriate funds. They argue, he was saying, yeah, man, they argue about who's going to be president. But what they are overlooking is the fact that no matter who's president, you got certain federal funds that's coming to this city and has been coming here ever since 1975. They're going to come no matter who's the president. They're coming to Detroit.
Yeah.
And guess what? They don't get to the residents, not because of the president. They don't get to the residents because of the mayor and the city council. They make sure it goes other places than to the residents.
Wow.
And so I began to look into that. And that's true. Then he told me, and they taking out billions, that's what it be, in loans called bonds, municipal bonds. And with a high interest rate, with a 10, 20, 30, or 35-year duration that we have to pay back. So actually, say for instance, a $250 million bond becomes a $600 or $700 million bond by the time it's paid off with the interest.
Yeah, bonding capacity, not just for local governments, but even America itself is like, I don't know how much people are paying attention to, is one of the key economic engines for governments.
Yeah.
And how you monitor it and where things go, which stand into things. So like people even talk about, like, I don't know if people have seen the credit rating of Detroit and the press conferences associated with that allow for different statuses of what bonding capacity can exist, especially a city that's coming out of, as my godmother would say, an illegal bankruptcy.
Yeah.
What does exist? So you're paying more attention to this framework, and in it, you have a commitment where you're down there. You're highlighting, and I definitely want to get you and Ramon back because we got to expand. But I like this story. We're towards a close, but I do got a couple more questions, even in that framework, that from '99 through in your writing and being published and getting a message out to people. As you say, the story was always more about you. If the story was always more about you in their framing and writing, when you create something like the opportunities to be published in the Citizen and become a voice for the public, for people to listen to, and you've always been a personal voice with organizing from a young age on up, how do you frame this and balance this moving forward towards speaking for people that you may not know, people that you may not touch? What's your process for that?
Well, I've always wanted to do something for my people when I saw that they were being exploited, and I felt that I was given a gift of expression, of communication, especially through writing, but also through speech. I got better at speaking, communicating my ideas vocally, although I still think I'm better at doing it with the written word, right? But I use them both. And so I feel it's an obligation that the Creator has put on me. I believe in the Creator. I believe that the Creator gave me this gift. I didn't give it to myself. I didn't give myself life.
Yeah.
So I believe that the same entity that I call the Creator, that gave me life, gave me this gift. And the reason why it gave me this gift was to help my people in that capacity. So when I see something, some form of oppression or exploitation, be it financial or otherwise, I feel an obligation to communicate that to my people. And so I do it the best way that I can as opportunities to present themselves. And so the city, initially I was doing it through the newspaper. I used to write for a local newspaper called The Telegram when I met Ramon. That's how I first engaged him. I said, man, let me interview you, And we met. I interviewed him at a restaurant. I wrote an article and put it in the newspaper. And then I wrote some more articles. Then I began to host a show called 7 Days by a guy named, but anyway. And I had Ramon on. And, but it got to the point that I think some of the things that I was saying, it ruffled some feathers.
I can see that.
And, newspapers depend on the city government. They depend on certain things that they might get from the city government. They don't want no smoke. They don't want no trouble. And next thing you know, I was no longer working for the newspaper.
I can see that.
But that didn't stop me from working with Ramon. And so I used my skill as a writer. Ramon is much more astute at filing lawsuits or dealing with legal papers or filing legal papers and so forth and so on. He knows because they've got to be formatted a certain way. There's a certain legalese that needs, and he's much more astute at that than I am. But I lend my talent in terms of, tweaking it, fine tuning, maybe adding something to it. But the legal part of it, you know, he's much more gifted and skilled in that. And so I'm still doing it. I'm still communicating to my people, or to the people, what I perceive to be, or what I have exposed or uncovered as exploitation. You know, and just like one time, somebody said, Ramon and I went to Lansing, and we went live when we were in Lansing. We were in the Richard H. Austin building, trying to meet with one of those city officials who was running some skullduggery on us as far as the capacity for us issuing bonds here in the city of Detroit. And so when we went live, somebody commented, "What y'all down there talking about some bonds? You got black folks dying in the streets and y'all down there talking about some bonds." I said, "Brother, you don't get it. One of the reasons why black folks is dying in the streets because they ain't got no resources. And one of the reasons why we ain't got no resources is because they issuing bonds that's supposed to go towards us, to us, and they withholding that money from us."
Yeah.
And so you got black folks out here that don't have no resources, don't have no job, don't have no training, don't have, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And if those resources that they were issuing with these bonds was going back to us, we could set up skilled trade schools. We can set up employment. We can have resources for our young people. And maybe there wouldn't be as much killing out here in the streets.
Yeah.
See, that's what he didn't understand.
Yeah, the opportunity, as I always say, by providing more opportunity, you get different outcomes. You know, and so much of it, like, man, oh man, I'm gonna have to bring you back so we can get more into the details of the bonding, because I got some other classic questions, but I even want to spin my classic questions for you a little bit. But first, before I even get there, as we get closer to a close of this Detroit is Different, how do people get in contact with you if they want to find out more, if they want to see some of the writing, if they want to experience some of what you're doing?
I'll give my cell phone number, 313-629-4742.
Okay. All right. Now, with that, classic Detroit is Different. Very first car, year, make, and model, year you got it.
My very first car? Oh, man. Oh, man. My very first car. It's been so long ago. I think it was a Cadillac.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was a 65 Coupe de Ville.
For real?
Yeah.
Whoa, man. If you still had that, boy, you'd be able to
Yeah.
get half a mint for it. Was it clean when you got it, or was it, somebody's
I
was
thought
it a
so.
little-
You couldn't tell me no different. I thought it was the best car in the world.
Hey, there's a lot of people that still think like that, man. That was a car with real metal, as they say.
Oh, yeah, go through a brick wall.
Where's the first place you went when you got it?
My girlfriend's house.
Hey, that was the place to go.
To show off and show out.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're the DJ at the end of the fireworks. Woodward and Jefferson. You get to play 2 songs. What 2 songs you playing?
The DJ?
Yep.
Oh, man. You asking some hard questions, brother, because there's a lot of beautiful songs out there that I can remember.
Yeah.
I'll say off the top of my head, My Girl by the Temptations.
Okay.
And, oh, man. There's so many of them. More Love by the Miracles. Smokey Robinson and Miracles.
Okay. All right, last question. You could rename Woodward after one Detroiter. Who would it be and why?
Rename Detroit after one Detroiter.
Rename Woodward after one Detroiter.
Woodward.
Yep.
After one Detroiter. I would rename Detroit. Man, that's another big one. I'm just gonna say off the top of my head, I would rename it after my stepdad, Charles Northington, because he was I guess you might say, the spark that
got you in this.
Gave me the mindset that I have, where I struggle against any form of oppression.
That's deep.
I think he started it.
That's
So
deep.
I'd have to name it after my stepdad. His name was Charles Northington.
I'm with it.
All right.
All right, with that, the spin of Detroit is different. Definitely dynamic, a lot of different culture. Lord knows, you gave me a good time to speak and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
I'm running into what's next. But, man, this was a rich one. This is going to be one of that I'm going to remember. Especially, man, you mentioned a black hospital I didn't know about in River Rouge. Oh,
Yeah,
man, I'm
Sumby.
going to go back to that. I'm going to have to study.
Yeah,
I'm going to have to
Sumby.
be studying that one.
Spelled S-U-M-B-Y.
S-U-M-B-Y. I want to
Yeah.
look that up.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, my brother.
Thank you for having me on. And hey, you got to invite me back. We'll delve into these
Oh, yeah, we
these
definitely.
securities and these bonds.
Let's do it. Let's do
All
it.
right.
All right. Peace.
Detroit is Different is where you get information, artistry, history, music, and even comedy. Detroit is Different, a home for the culture of Detroit. Visit online at DetroitisDifferent.com today.